Okay, welcome everyone. I'm Seema Modi, correspondent at CNBC Business News. We certainly appreciate you joining us today here on LinkedIn. I am the co host of Women and Wealth along with Patty Martell. This is an ongoing series where we dissect the biggest issues facing women in the corporate world and also explore ways in which women can be smarter and more savvier investors at home and in the workplace. Patty?
Yeah, and the reason why we're doing this talk is because obviously your career is one of the biggest investments that you're going to make. Not just investing in your education, but also your time. I mean, I know how much time I spent in the office, at work, or thinking about work. And we know, and this has been a long pandemic, and it has disproportionately affected women, right? Whether it's the huge number that left the workforce to take care of their children and their families, and that has a real cost to the economy. We had the Great Resignation, and now there's this push, in some companies to get like everyone back in the office. And I think, and that's really why we wanted to have this conversation with Reshma. She wrote about this in her book Pay Up, and she's talking about the future of women and work. And she says we need real change, to fix the burnout, to fix the inequity. I'll just give you a little more background on who she is. She's the founder of Girls Who Code and the Marshall Plan for Moms. She's a best-selling author, and just a champion of female empowerment. Her influential TED Talk, where she said to teach girls to be brave, not perfect, has been viewed more than 6 million times. So let me bring her in. Reshma, thank you so much for joining us. We're so excited to have you. Welcome to Women in Wealth. Let me just start from the beginning. Why did you write this book?
Gosh, because women are in crisis. During the pandemic, over 11 million women left the workforce. 2 years later, there's still, over 1 million women missing. And, so many women had to supplement essentially, their paid labor for unpaid labor when the schools closed. And we live in a society that doesn't have affordable childcare, that doesn't have paid leave, that is fighting against flexibility and remote working. And so, workplaces have never been designed for us. And I think that given the Great Resignation and the moment that we're in, we have a once in a lifetime opportunity to finally make workplaces work for women.
Reshma, we tend to focus a lot on CNBC around wealth, creating wealth, accumulating wealth as women. And I'm just curious, from the research you've done and also the countless conversations you've had with women across the nation, what are some of the mistakes that women make when it comes to investing?
Well, I mean, I still think that we are taught to be risk mitigators. You mentioned my talk, bravery, not perfection. I mean, it's literally embedded in our DNA. To only do the things that we're good at, to not take risks, to draw on the lines, to not take up space. And so, I think in many ways we just haven't been taught to be risk takers. And so when we invest, we want a sure thing. And as you know, I mean, I would say as an investor, most of the things that I invest in don't work. And so you have to be comfortable and okay with taking risks. And we just haven't taught our girls that.
But
Yeah.
and that risk also extends, I think, just in kind of how we navigate our career, right? I mean, I think we talk about investments and finance. We are risk averse, but also, in terms of like maybe not going for that promotion that you're kind of on. You're like, gosh, yeah, I really don't know if I'm qualified. And where men have no problem raising their hand to apply, for promotions and for jobs that maybe are a little kind of beyond or push them to to expand their skill set, and women are still reluctant to do that. How do we change that?
I mean, this is what's been broken about corporate feminism for a really long time. And this, I saw this in the pandemic. I found myself, with two little babies, running an organization, and it nearly broke me. And I learned the hard way that having it all is just a euphemism for doing it all. And, I spent the past 10 years telling girls to barnstorm the corner office, to lean in real hard, that, the corner office was just an express train. They just had to get on it. And we've been taught that all we have to do is color code our calendar and find a mentor and a sponsor and like cut in, we'll be right there. And so we've constantly been trying to fix women instead of fixing the structure. And so the reality is like we've always been prepared. As 72% of high school, valedictorians are women. The majority of those that have their bachelor's degree are women. The majority of those getting their master's degree, their PhD, are women. But we keep telling women, well, just take this course, take this class, just do this one thing. And it's all a lie. And we've got to stop telling it. And it really means just upending everything that we have learned about women's empowerment, everything I've learned. Throw out the confidence code. Stop doing a power pose. No, you don't need to quote lean in. You are already leaned in. And so it's a wholesale shift in everything we've learned, everything we've probably taught as leaders. And we got to do it now, because I think more than ever before, we need women's leadership. We need women to start companies. We need women to, raise their hand for promotions that they may not feel like they're prepared to, but they are quite frankly qualified to do. We need women to step up in ways that we've never needed them before.
It's interesting, in your book, you also detail how not only do women need to raise their hand and go for those opportunities, but they need to be strategic on how they handle conversations with their boss, the person they report to. Can you expand on that? I mean, managing that relationship, whether it's your team, your colleagues, but someone who you report to, how that can play a huge role in how they view you as someone that they want to promote over time.
Yeah, I mean, I think part of it is that we don't celebrate our successes. We don't talk about our successes. We don't tell our bosses where we want to go, because we've been basically taught to, to be modest. I always say, go to any like 6th grade graduation. And when the boys get the award, they're like doing the dab. They're like, I got this. And what do we do? We're like, who, me? The first time when people are like, congratulations on your best-selling book, I'm like, oh, I mean, I don't know. Was it good? And so oftentimes people don't know what we're doing and what we're working on, and because we're taught to not actually tout our successes. And so I think it's really important for us to be very clear about where we want to go, how we want to get there, and what we need from people to help us get there. People used to always say, well, with women, oh, don't be transactional. And I tell them, be transactional with me. When you email, tell me what you want, how I can help you, who I need to email, where I need to send the check, because I'm invested in you. And it's all these things that I think in many ways that we've been taught that haven't been serving us.
And just a pinpoint on why you think women perhaps aren't always doing that, does it come down to insecurity? It just comes down to not used to being so forthright? What do you think it is that's stopping?
No, actually, we've told women not to behave that way, right? Yeah. We've told them to not be bossy, to be really nice, to be people pleasers, to not tout their accomplishments, that is not seen as attractive. And listen, unfortunately, when we see women leaders who have swag, are actually, prepared and ready to lead, we often see them being clamped down and being told to be quiet. And so we don't have a lot of good role models out there of women who have done this successfully. And that's part of the problem. But unfortunately, I think laying in wait and waiting for someone to notice us, and being prepared and being ready and just hoping that somebody will notice you, that's not working either, because we see so many, quite frankly, men that are just not as qualified as us getting the job, getting the promotion, getting elected into that office, and it's too much and it's frustrating. There's no better example of that, quite frankly, than the Supreme Court, in terms of what we've seen as a lawyer, and I would say in people who just don't know how to interpret the law.
Yes, and of course, here we've been sizing up the corporate response to that Supreme Court ruling. Many companies coming out, from Uber to Airbnb, saying that they will cover the travel costs for women who cannot receive the services in the state that they are living in. I'm just curious, what else you think corporations can do?
Look, I think it's a great first step, but I think we have to make sure that everything is not performative. The reality is in the next few weeks, 26 states are basically going to have an all but total a ban on abortion. That means half of the women living in America that are, in reproductive age are not going to be able to access an abortion. Women are going to die. In fact, women are already dying. So this is an emergency, a national emergency. And so we have to actually take really, really, really bold actions. And so I am happy that hundreds of companies have said that they're going to pay for abortions, pay for travel. But like for Uber and Amazon, don't just do it for your employees, do it for your contractors. The contractors are the ones that are low wage, that are living in communities that are not going to have access to abortion, or living in states, where abortion is not going to be available or safe. So go over and beyond. Every CEO, don't make a quiet statement because you're worried that you're going to lose clients. Say it loudly and proudly, and use the word abortion and use the word forced birth. Talk about really what is happening. This is about control over women's bodies. And fundamentally, you can't have equality. You can't have equity if we don't have control over our own bodies. And we gotta also think out of the box. What are the other things that we should be doing? I want to make sure that corporations, have a ban, quite frankly, on contributions of elected officials that are anti-choice. And we know that it's one thing to make a performative statement, and then it's another thing to send a check. And that has been happening far too often on racial equality, on voting rights. And so it can't happen here. And so this is a moment where the private sector, quite frankly, has got to lead. There's no other option. This is not a thing where things are going to change overnight. Yeah. This is a decade long, at least a generational fight. And in the 10 years that we figure out how to get our rights back, because that Supreme Court is young, and those state legislators, are those areas are pretty red. And so the reality is that millions of women are going to die. Millions of women are going to die.
Yeah, Reshma, I just want to go back to this, this idea of, obviously because the pandemic is still ongoing, right? And it's going on 2 years now. We talked about how the number of women that have left the workforce. Mm. What is that going to do for the pipeline, right? Which was, we had a trickle, right? We had a trickle of women that were kind of working their way up. And when I think about the number of women that have left, what does that do for the next generation of leaders or the C-suite? Like, how do we recover that?
It's devastating, because the jobs numbers actually don't show how many people have downshifted their careers, how many people were, in management or close to the C-suite, and then the pandemic happened and daycare centers were shut down, or their kids were broken because of mental health, and they changed, their path. And that, I know so many women who've made that choice, and that's not reflective in the job numbers. And so, what I'm doing at the Marshall Plan for Moms is really figuring out, okay, how do we make structural change in companies to make sure we get women back? We did a survey with McKinsey, and the number one reason why women left the workforce was childcare. And so I think in this moment, we launched the National Business Childcare Coalition. Companies have an obligation to start providing childcare benefits, whether that's in the form of a subsidy, whether that's flexibility, whether that's paying for, Vivi or Bright Horizons or Care.com. But you have got to solve parents' childcare problems. You cannot work unless you have childcare, period. Secondly, it also comes in terms of, paid leave. We are still the only industrialized nation that doesn't offer paid leave. It comes in the form of, there's still resistance towards flexibility and remote work. The reality is, like I said, workplaces that were never designed for us. Something simple like school days are 8 to 3 and work days are 9 to 5. So the women forever have been having to balance how they handle picking up their kids from school and doing work. Well, now the pandemic has showed us that actually you don't have to put women who are, again, 2/3 of caregivers are women. We got to work on changing that quotient. But until then, we have to accept the reality of that and say, how do we make it possible for women to have their caregiving responsibilities? Sometimes it's children, sometimes it's elderly parents, and work. And how are we going to facilitate that? So instead of resisting it and saying, everybody back in the office 5 days a week, every day, talk to me about the technology that you're building. Talk to me about the norms you're building. Talk to me about how you're going to make sure that, you don't have a 2-tier system, one for those that are accessing remote work and one for those that are not. How are you changing the way you have compensation and performance reviews? So we got to go beyond the past. We're not going back to the old normal.
I feel like we, in some sense, we are still getting this wrong, right? Like I have friends that have small children that were nursing and working. They came back and, they were still nursing. And, I literally, one of my, someone I know was saying that the mother's room that had been converted was a place where she can go and pump, was a converted closet. And I couldn't believe that. And then another woman at a, huge financial institution in New York, they had there was someone going in, like a man going into the into the mother's room to take phone calls because it was quiet in there or something. I was like, how is this like still being tolerated? Anyway, but it's happening, right? Like, I mean, we are certainly getting some of these things still wrong. And there's, I
Well, we've
mean,
always got it wrong, right? I mean,
yeah.
and listen, I felt I felt prey to that. We knew that the implicit deal that we had to make as mothers to work in the workforce is that we hid our motherhood. So you didn't complain about breastfeeding in closets. You didn't it was fine for the man to go use the restroom because it was the quietest place, right? You didn't talk about your kids. You didn't say you needed to leave for a doctor's appointment. So we have got to change that, especially as we are entering a point in our nation where we are forcing birth. We have to ask ourselves, we are a nation that forces birth, that, doesn't have paid leave, that doesn't have affordable childcare, that has a baby formula shortage. It's all interconnected.
And now
And
we're forcing them back to work, right? Like, you're
forcing them back to work. I
back to
mean,
work, yeah.
back to work 10 days after having a baby.
Hmm.
What country do we live in? Meaning, like, we have got, if we are about family values, then let's be about family values. And so for those companies out there, Seema, to your point, that are like, I don't want to enter this conversation. It's very controversial. It's very partisan. Fine. Are you offering childcare? What's your paid leave program? You know what I mean? Are you resisting flexibility? How are you supporting parents? And so we got to start asking those questions.
We talk about how we can manage it all, right? Be that caregiver, whether it's taking care of an elderly parent or as a mom, and at the same time managing a demanding career. You talk about in your book about how you lean on your partner and how you've actually had some really frank discussions with your husband Nihal, who I know well, about how to manage your time schedule, right? Creating a routine. Can you walk us through that? What's the advice for other couples out there?
Well, I mean, the reality is 1/3 of divorces are about the chores. And I will say to you, all of our couples counseling sessions are pretty much about this conversation. And the reality is, my husband, Holly's wonderful. And I married the guy that was going to do the dishes, that did the laundry. I mean, very clear. I asked these questions very clear. He asked me to marry him 3 times before I said yes for this very reason. But when we had a baby, I took my paid leave and he didn't. And so my to-do list went like this and his shrunk. And so we really had to talk and negotiate. So, for example, I do the mornings, he does the nights. But if I'm sitting around at 6 p.m., eating a bowl of ice cream, watching Netflix, he'll be like, hey, can you warm up the bottle? Can you grab the diaper for me? And I get then roped back into his job. So I now at 6 p.m., I leave. I have my girls' dinner. I go for a walk. I hang out with my dog. I do other things. I'm just out. And so I think for us as women, we have to create really clear boundaries and have no guilt about them. I can't tell you how many girlfriends I have that will go on a girls trip, but then buy all the groceries, make all the lists, do all this stuff, and then leave. And we gotta just go. They will figure it out. And so much about equality we've really never talked about. We've have so many HBR articles and so many conversations on how to get a mentor, how to get a sponsor. But I think the conversation we need to have now is, how do we advance gender equality at home? How do we get to a world where we have 50% caregiving? And what kind of corporate policies, what kind of corporate conversations can we have to get to that world? Because I really do believe if we can get to gender equality at home, we're going to get to gender equality in the workforce. And it's also going to have people recognize these conversations that we're having on repro rights about how important and critical it is to give people, regardless of your position, on choice, autonomy over their own bodies.
And I think also, Reshma, that does require a little bit, when you're talking about this 50-50, kind of breaking up of responsibility at home. I think that also requires a mind shift on women's part, because a lot of times we just automatically take it on. We'll do it. Sometimes it's just like, well, I've been doing it. I've always been doing it. So I'll
And
just keep
proudly
doing it.
too, right? We get
And
so
proudly,
happy when we
yes,
can do it all.
exactly. Yeah. Mhm.
Absolutely. I mean, when we go traveling, of course, I'm packing for me, the kids, the dog. Nahal's just grabbing his bag. We go out and we get in the car, and he'll be like, hey, did you get Sean's frog? And I know I look at him like, of course I did. Right? There's like this pride in that it's part of our identity. And so, but we've got to let that go. We got to let, as my friend Tiffany DeFou says, you got to let the ball drop. And we have to kind of shift. And it goes back to perfectionism, and again, like, being a bad mom is the worst thing you can say to a mom, right? And so we've kind of built up these tropes in culture about what it means to be a good mom. And it means a self-sacrificing martyr who does it all. And I think in this pandemic, with everything that's happening in the country, it's too much. And it's why 51% of mothers say they're anxious and depressed. I mean, we have a crisis in terms of suicide rates for moms, in terms of alcohol addiction, in terms of Adderall addiction. It's moms are in mental health crisis, and because we think moms don't break, and because there's not space for us to like talk about it. We are holding all that in, and this is happening. This kind of breaking point is happening because of the fact that we have no support. A friend of mine from Argentina, she was saying, it's so weird in America. Like in Argentina, if you're a mom, you're a queen. If you're a mom of twins, forget about it, right? I would never use the word queen and mother to describe mothers in America, right? And we need to ask ourselves, well, why? Like, why is it that, again, moms in many ways are the least resourced? Even if you think about workplace discrimination, right? The motherhood penalty is the reason why we have a gender gap in pay. But we don't talk about it that way. We like the image of the pay gap to be the women's soccer team, but that's not what the pay gap is about. We don't have practices against, essentially, trainings against rooting out, discrimination against moms in the workplace. Even though every single mom can tell you probably a weekly or a daily microaggression that's made against them because of their caregiving responsibility.
Reshma, are there certain companies that you think, maybe across corporate America, private or public, in your conversations that you would say are doing a good job at supporting women, especially as they become mothers? We've seen, have discussed the emphasis on bringing more diversity to Wall Street. Goldman Sachs now has a rule saying we will not take a company public unless the company on their board has someone who has racial or gender diversity. So that's happening. But what about paid leave?
Yeah, I mean, I think there are a bunch of companies in our coalition that are doing great work. Synchrony Financial, they've supported flexibility and remote working. They're taking a lot of policies to think about how do they build a culture that supports parents. Etsy, I think, is an example of, they basically have both for their male and female employees, they're taking, paid leave, in the same amount, right? And so I bet if you surveyed Etsy's families, they probably have more gender equality at home than other families. I think that there are still companies out there like Apple that don't have gender neutral paid leave policies. In today's age, that's unacceptable. And I think for a lot of companies in financial services, it's one thing to offer paid leave and a second thing to gaslight men when they take it. And I think that that's what happens a lot. And so I think the question in 2022 is not like, are you offering paid leave? Who's taking it? Are you incentivizing taking it? What is the results? Are men taking it? Are you setting the example for it? So we have to ask different questions so we can make sure that things are just not performative. The second thing is that, and then when people take it, when women take it, when they come back, are they coming back at the same level? What are the promotion rates? For mothers? What are the compensation rates? For mothers? And so these are things that so much of this is cultural, and a lot of times is an algorithm. If you want to root out the motherhood penalty, it's an algorithm. It's not hard anymore to do this. You just have to have the will.
Let me ask you a hard question, and I say it's hard just because I have not I've not gotten a good answer to this. How do we deal with imposter syndrome?
Oh, I hate that word. Yeah. I'm going to send you my TikTok.
Okay. Okay.
But I'm going to tell you the story real quick that I told. Yeah. I was asked to give a speech at Bill Gates' summit, and I was asked to give a speech between Bill Gates and Warren Buffett. And I remember thinking in the backstage, like, wow, I wish they gave me 12 minutes instead of 10. And then I was like, how did I become that person? And, I have been in every single room. I've met every CEO, every leader, every president, every prime minister. And I'm like, you? What?
Yes.
But I say it's such a blessing. Like, I wish I
Yeah.
could take that knowledge and put
Yeah.
it, because I think that we are not ready, qualified, prepared to do the job. And we've never had a conversation about unearned privilege. And a lot of people hold their positions because of unearned, undeserved privilege. And so our imposter syndrome is a fabrication. It is a lie. It is something that we have actually been, bought and sold. And so we have to stop giving any credence to that. Because if you simply look at if we want to live in an American culture that's about a democracy and about a meritocracy, then let's live in a meritocracy. And if we were living in a pure meritocracy, we would be running the world. And so we just have to, and I think so much of what I've realized, I've again been bought and sold, is that I need to take this I need to take this class to learn how to be an investor. I need to basically read this book to walk into a room with confidence. I need to watch this TED Talk so I can learn how to be why. And instead of just saying to women, you're ready, go, you're ready. And so, because men don't read, why are men not reading the same books we read? Why are men not taking the same courses that we read? Why is it still that the majority of leadership looks like the minority of this country? Like, we got to wake up to that.
Yeah.
And that means we got to really stop, really, really, really change the language. Like I say to this, Patty, like, I will not actually answer that question anymore. If you want to invite me to there are like 20 questions, I'm not answering anymore.
Like, don't give it the priority it deserves. Like, it doesn't deserve to be in that line of questioning.
Yeah, and I tell this.
The more we ask it, the more
I was part of the problem, right? I was the girls who code, like, brain, like, I was part of the problem because I really believed that. And it's just, and I'm not entertaining that, and nor should any of us anymore.
Biggest piece of advice, tips to women who want to build their wealth. There's a recession potentially looming right around the corner. Of course, paid leave is a huge issue, but as women try to build wealth, your biggest piece of advice or hot tips?
I mean, I would say, like, chase failure. I always say Serena Williams sits at the edge of her ability and a coach who says, do it again, do it again, do it again, do it again. Everything I've achieved in my life is because I took big risks. I ran for Congress against an 18-year incumbent, got my ass kicked. I started a Girls Who Code organization when I did not know how to code. I've been advocating for moms in economic policies, but I'm not an economist, right? Every single day I say something that's provocative, that gets me in trouble, that makes me both lose friends and gain friends. And that's the way that you have to live your life if you really want to make an impact.
Awesome.
Yeah. Well, let's end there, Reshma. This has been a really great talk. Thank you for your time. I really appreciate it.
Thanks for having me.
Thank you for all the good work we're doing. We got to keep pushing ahead.
Reshma Saujani.
Thanks, everyone.
Thank you everyone for tuning in. Bye.